Commander Rylan Verne kicked the bulkhead just to hear it clang, an old habit from when ships were made of steel and optimism. On Arclight, optimism was a luxury and steel was mostly metaphorical. The station orbited Voss, a star as old and weary as the jokes about Ryland's last relationship. A sun that should have retired centuries ago but stuck around like a bad penny, or worse, an ex with a key to your apartment. "Damn stars as tired as your leadership, Rylan," muttered Lieutenant Harper, leaning casually against a console that was probably more advanced than half the fleet back home. Harper was the kind of officer who could manage to look relaxed in a firefight. And probably less bright. "Thanks for that vote of confidence," Rylan replied, running a hand through hair that had forgotten what it was like to stay in one place. "Is this a complaint about my style or my substance?" "Both," Harper grinned, "but mostly about the smell." Rylan ignored the jab, eyes fixed on the observation window. The dying star flickered outside, casting long shadows across the deck like a bad noir film. "Reminds me of the last time I tried to get a tan," he murmured. The Arclight was humanity's latest attempt to coexist with the Xanthari, a species that looked like a bad acid trip. Their skin shimmered in unearthly colors and they had more limbs than anyone should need. They were the kind of aliens that made you wonder if the universe hadn't already exhausted its patience with bipedal life. "Speaking of which, where's our tentacled friends today?" Rylan asked. "They usually flop around the mess hall about now. Probably trying to work out why we haven't all gone insane yet," Harper replied. "Or maybe they're just hiding from your cologne." "Maybe," Rylan said, though his mind was elsewhere. Rumor had it that a new substance was circulating among the crew, courtesy of the Xanthari. Something addictive, with effects as unpredictable as a politician's promise. He'd seen the hollow eyes, the jittery hands, the subtle exchange of glances in the corridors. Harper seemed to read his thoughts. "You think the rumors are true, don't you?" Rylan shrugged. "They're always true, but only about half the time." "That's reassuring." "Hey, if you want reassurance, you're in the wrong business. Try knitting or something." Rylan turned away from the window, his eyes falling on Private Miller, who was fiddling with a datapad like it was the last link to sanity. "Miller, status report." Miller looked up, eyes wide like a kid caught sneaking candy. Everything's as expected, sir." "So, a complete mess then. Good to know." Rylan leaned on the console, casting his gaze over the bustling chaos of the command deck. It was like watching a swarm of bees, each with its own erratic path, yet somehow forming a coherent picture. "Commander," Harper said, voice lower now, "I've heard some of the crew are having issues." "What kind of issues?" "The kind that ends with someone floating out an airlock." "Right," Rylan sighed, "and just when I thought we'd have a quiet week." The doors slid open with a hiss, and a Xanthari diplomat slithered in. Ambassador Crom was a swirling mass of colors, like an oil slick given life. "Ah, Commander Verne," it said in a voice like two cats hissing. "Always a pleasure." "Ambassador," Rylan nodded. "To what do we owe the honor?" Crom's eyes, if they could be called that, twinkled mischievously. "I have heard of some disturbances among your crew." "Troublesome, yes? Disturbances?" Rylan feigned ignorance. "I thought that was just Harper's cooking." Crom's laughter was a garbled symphony of screeches. "Ah, your humor is refreshing. However, I refer to their recent cravings." Rylan felt his stomach twist. "Cravings? Yes," Crom said, its limbs weaving a pattern only it understood. "A fascinating reaction to certain Xanthari exports." "Exports," Harper repeated, with all the skepticism of someone who's heard, "I love you," one too many times. "You mean drugs." "Substances," Crom corrected, as if the distinction mattered. "Our studies show humans are uniquely susceptible." "Is that a compliment or an insult?" Harper asked. "Both," Crom replied, its tone as unreadable as its expression. "But I am here to help." Rylan pinched the bridge of his nose. "Let me guess, for a price." "Of course," Crom said, with all the sincerity of a snake oil salesman. "We Xanthari have our own interests to protect." "Great," Rylan grumbled. "And here I was hoping for a simple day." "Simple days are overrated," Harper chimed in. "Besides, it's not like we're paid enough for this shit." Rylan turned back to Crom. "All right, Ambassador, what's your solution?" Crom's limbs twisted in what might have been a shrug. A temporary cease in the distribution might suffice. "But, naturally, there are complexities involved." Complexities, Rylan echoed dryly. You mean bribes, deals, and a complete lack of human dignity. Precisely, Crom agreed, unbothered. But it is a small price for peace, yes? Rylan sighed, feeling the weight of 1,000 bad decisions looming over him. Fine, we'll talk terms. But be warned, Ambassador, if this goes south, it'll be your head on the chopping block. Crom's laughter filled the room again, a sound that made Rylan think of broken glass and rusty hinges. Oh, Commander, I have several heads. Lucky you, Harper muttered, crossing his arms. I'd settle for just keeping mine attached. The conversation was far from over, and the problems were only beginning. But for now, they had an uneasy truce, the kind that felt more like a bomb ticking down than a resolution. All right, people, Rylan said, clapping his hands. Let's figure out how to stop this station from becoming a floating rehab clinic. Miller raised a hesitant hand. Commander, what if the crew doesn't want help? Rylan smirked grimly. Then we'll just have to remind them that in space, no one can hear you whine. Harper chuckled, and even Crom seemed to enjoy the joke. But beneath the laughter was a tension, a reminder that out here, far from Earth, survival was as fragile as a promise. And as anyone on Arclight could tell you, promises were best kept off the menu. Rylan paced the command deck like a caged animal, which was an apt description since the Arclight felt more like a zoo for maladjusted humans these days. The rumors about the mysterious Zintheri substance had spread faster than a space plague, and suddenly half the crew seemed to be walking around with the glassy-eyed look of people who discovered a new religion and were just waiting for the spaceship to take them to the promised land. Harper, what the hell are we looking at? Rylan grumbled, leaning over the console. He was starting to suspect that these consoles were more for show than actual function. Much like his own leadership style. Harper gave a nonchalant shrug, the kind that suggested he'd seen this all before in some bar brawl back home. Looks like the crew's trying out this new Zintheri export for themselves. And by trying, I mean diving in headfirst like lemmings off a cliff. Great, Rylan muttered, because what we really needed was a floating junkie convention. From across the deck, Miller raised an eyebrow, still fiddling with his datapad like it might hold the secrets to the universe. Should we report it, sir? What? You mean tell the brass that their shiny new peace project is turning into a space rehab center? Sure, Miller, why not? Maybe we can get a medal for monumental cock-ups. Miller blanched, clearly regretting his suggestion. Maybe not, sir. Harper chuckled, a sound that echoed like nails on a chalkboard. Look on the bright side, Rylan. If everyone's too stoned to function, maybe we'll finally get some peace and quiet around here. Rylan huffed, turning his attention back to the observation window. The star Voss flickered like a candle about to go out, a fitting backdrop to the chaos unfolding on the station. The joke about getting a tan seemed less funny now that his crew was evaporating into a haze of alien-induced euphoria. Ambassador Crom was right about one thing, Rylan said, almost to himself. Humans are uniquely susceptible to stupidity, mostly. Always been our defining trait, Harper agreed, watching Miller out of the corner of his eye. Hey, Miller, how's that pad treating you? Miller looked up, startled. Fine, sir. Just trying to keep track of reports. Seems like more crew members are, well, experiencing issues. Rylan didn't need a datapad to know that things were spiraling. He could feel it in the air, thick as the smell of burnt coffee that permeated the station like a bad memory. All right, he said, straightening up. We need to get a handle on this before someone ends up floating outside with an oxygen mask and a prayer. Harper raised an eyebrow. And how do you suggest we do that? Host an intervention? Gather everyone around for a heartfelt chat about the dangers of alien drugs? Maybe not, Rylan admitted. But we do need to start somewhere. Find out who's distributing this stuff and shut it down. Assuming they haven't already imbibed their weight in Zintheri crack, Harper said dryly. Still, worth a shot. Rylan nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. Ilok, another Zintheri ambassador, had been shadowing Crom lately, and his presence was about as welcome as a hangover at Sunday brunch. Ilok was all soft smiles and pretty words, but there was something about him that set Rylan's teeth on edge. Where's our friend Ilok? Rylan asked, scanning the room as if the alien might suddenly materialize. Harper snorted, probably off somewhere, singing Kumbaya with the crew. Or, making sure his investments are paying off. Right, Rylan said, rubbing the back of his neck. I feel like we're missing something. The Zintheri have too much to gain from this. Harper leaned in, his voice dropping. You think they're trying to weaken us? Make sure we're too busy tripping balls to notice what they're really up to. It's a possibility, Rylan agreed. Iloqu's not stupid. He's as cunning as they come, and twice as slippery. Slippery, huh? Harper grinned. Sounds like my ex. Rylan chuckled despite himself. Well, let's hope Iloq doesn't have a key to your quarters. The door whooshed open, and as if summoned by their conversation, Iloq slithered in, all shimmering scales and calculated benevolence. Commander Vern, Iloq said, his voice a soothing melody that made Rylan distrust him even more. I hear there have been complications. Complications is one way to put it, Rylan replied. Another would be complete and utter chaos. Iloq inclined his head, the gesture almost human. We are here to assist, of course. Assist how? Harper asked, eyeing Iloq like a cat watching a particularly suspicious mouse. By offering alternatives, Iloq said smoothly. We have substances that promote focus, diligence, clarity. Rylan crossed his arms, not buying the line for a second. And you're just offering these out of the goodness of your many hearts? Naturally, Iloq replied, as if the notion of altruism was as foreign to him as a free lunch. We desire peace and cooperation, as always. Peace and cooperation, Harper echoed. Funny how those words always seem to come at a price. Indeed, Iloq said, not missing a beat. But the price is negotiable. Rylan sighed, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down like a vice. Fine, let's talk terms. But know this, Iloq, if you're playing us, Iloq smiled, a gesture that was anything but reassuring. I would expect nothing less than vigilance, Commander. After all, trust is earned, not given. Rylan nodded, though he didn't trust Iloq as far as he could throw him in zero gravity. Miller, set up a meeting. I want all the key players there, no exceptions. Yes, sir, Miller replied, already tapping away at his datapad. As Iloq slithered out, Rylan turned to Harper. Keep an eye on him. I want to know his every move. Harper nodded. Like a hawk, Rylan. Like a hawk with a grudge. The command deck was quieter now, but the silence felt heavy, filled with unspoken fears and half-formed strategies. Rylan knew they were on a knife's edge, and one wrong move could send them all tumbling into the abyss. All right, team, he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Let's get to work. We've got a station to save. Harper snorted. Save, huh? More like hold together with duct tape and wishful thinking. Hey, whatever works, Rylan replied, not sure if he was joking or just desperate. The crew dispersed, leaving Rylan alone with his thoughts. He stared out at the flickering star, wondering if it was mocking him with its dying light. You and me both, old friend, he murmured. The days that followed were a blur of whispered conversations and hushed meetings. Iloqu's alternatives were as popular as a space heater in a blizzard, and Rylan spent more time trying to put out metaphorical fires than he did sleeping. Commander, Miller said one morning, looking more haggard than usual. We've identified a few key distributors among the crew. Great, Rylan said, though it felt anything but. Let's have a chat with them, see if we can't persuade them to change careers. Harper joined them, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by something more serious. Iloqu's been keeping busy too. Meeting with Crom more often than I'd like. Figures, Rylan said, they're up to something. I can feel it in my bones. The distributors turned out to be a motley crew of misfits who'd probably failed drug dealer school but decided to give it a try anyway. Rylan rounded them up in the mess hall, where the smell of stale coffee mingled with the scent of fear. All right, folks, Rylan said, pacing in front of them like a teacher with a class full of delinquents. We're going to have a little chat about your extracurricular activities. The crew members shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting around as if they hoped the floor might swallow them whole. Harper leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You all know why you're here, right? We're not running a nanny state, but we can't have everyone zonked out on Zintheri export either. One of the crew, a skinny guy named Jax, raised a hand like this was some kind of twisted classroom. Look, Commander, we didn't mean any harm. Just trying to make life a bit more bearable, you know? Bearable, Rylan echoed, stopping in front of Jax. Bearable's not ODing on alien crack, Jax. Bearable's a hot cup of coffee and a decent night's sleep. Another crew member, a woman named Talia, chimed in. It's not just about getting high, sir. Ilok promised us focus, energy. Stuff we need out here. Rylan sighed, running a hand through his hair. I get it, space is hard, and life's a bitch. But we can't trade our sanity for a quick fix. Harper nodded. What Rylan's trying to say is, we'd rather have you alive and kicking than spaced out and useless. The crew mumbled their assent, but Rylan knew it wouldn't be that easy. The Zinthari's hold was strong, and desperation made people do stupid things. All right, Rylan said finally. You're not in trouble, yet, but if I catch wind of this happening again, you'll be scrubbing space toilets until you can taste the bleach. The crew scattered, leaving Rylan and Harper alone in the mess hall. Harper shook his head. We're in deep, Rylan. Tell me something I don't know, Rylan replied, though there was no heat in his words. They stood there for a while, looking out at the cosmos beyond the observation window. It was vast and uncaring, a reminder that in the grand scheme of things, they were little more than ants on a floating rock. Any idea what Iloqu's really after? Harper asked eventually. Rylan sighed, feeling the weight of the question. No clue, but whatever it is, it's not good for us. Great, Harper said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Just what I needed, another puzzle with death as the prize. They fell into silence, the kind that was almost comfortable if you didn't poke at it too much. Rylan knew they were running out of time, and the stakes were higher than ever. But for now, all they could do was keep fighting, one grim day at a time. Rylan Verne rolled out of his bunk, feeling like the universe had decided to use his skull for a drum solo. The usual morning routine. Pry open eyes, curse at the ceiling, and pretend that maybe today wouldn't suck quite as much as the last one. Commander, can you read me? Crackled the intercom. It was Harper, sounding way too chipper for someone who probably hadn't slept in days. Yeah, Harper, I'm alive. Barely, Rylan replied, swinging his feet to the cold floor. What's the damage? The usual, Harper said. Crew's still going full Zinthari zombie. And Iloqu's been having fun playing political chess with Crom. We're just pawns on a galactic game board. Great, Rylan muttered, running a hand through his hair. I love being a pawn. Especially when the stakes are our sanity. Anything else? Oh, just the small matter of our systems going haywire. Console's about as useful as a wet matchbook right now. Perfect. Let's meet on the command deck. Rylan sighed, dragging himself up. Time to play space janitor for the umpteenth time. When he arrived, Harper was already there, fingers dancing over the console like a pianist trying to coax music from a brick. Morning, Commander, or whatever time it is. My chrono's given up trying to keep track. Morning, Harper, Rylan replied, settling into the captain's chair with all the grace of a disgruntled bear. Let's see if we can keep this station from turning into a floating asylum. Good luck with that, Harper said, smirking. Most of the crew's already signed up for the Zinthari Philosophy Club. Yeah, and I bet membership includes a free hallucinogenic reality adjustment, Rylan muttered. We need to cut off the supply. But how? Maybe we could blow up the cargo bay? Harper offered, half joking. Tempting, but I think the higher-ups might object to losing the station, Rylan said dryly. No, we need something smarter. Harper nodded, tapping his chin. What if we intercept the shipments? The stuff's got to be coming from somewhere. Rylan considered this. Not bad. If we can isolate the transport conduits, maybe we can choke the flow. Like a botanical tourniquet, Harper said, grinning. But more explosive. Exactly. Rylan leaned forward, feeling the stirrings of a plan. We'll need Miller on this. He's got a knack for sneaky. Speaking of sneaky, Harper said, lowering his voice. Iloqu's been making moves. The Zinthari ambassador's been cozying up to some of our more influential crew. Building a fan club, huh? Rylan grumbled. Probably wants to make sure half the station's in his pocket. Or at least dependent on his alternatives, Harper replied, making air quotes. Iloqu's playing the long game. Then we'll play it better, Rylan said, a glint of determination in his eyes. We're not rolling over, not this time. Just like that time we outsmarted those Martian scavengers, Harper added, with a hint of nostalgic amusement. Ah, the good old days. When all we had to worry about was not getting shot in the back of the head. Yeah, simpler times, Harper chuckled. Rylan activated his personal console, sending a quick ping to Miller. A moment later, Miller shuffled onto the deck, looking like a man who'd been woken from the grave. "Commander, Harper," Miller greeted, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What's the word?" "We're cutting off the Zinthari supply," Rylan said. "You think you can handle the logistics?" Miller cracked a wry smile. "I'll need a miracle, or a strong cup of coffee. But yeah, I can do it." "Great. Get on it," Rylan said. "And if Ilock asks, tell him we're just redecorating." "Got it. You want us to use the good curtains or the ones with the bullet holes?" Miller quipped. "Surprise me," Rylan said, grinning. "Now go work your magic." With a nod, Miller departed, leaving Rylan and Harper to contemplate the mess they were in. The flickering star Voss loomed in the window, as if mocking their efforts. A dying sun for a dying effort. How poetic. "So, what's next?" Harper asked, leaning back with a yawn. "We keep our eyes on Ilock. Make sure he doesn't try anything too clever," Rylan replied, his gaze hardening. "And keep the crew focused on their jobs. Last thing we need is a group of space cadets guiding this station into an asteroid." "Or into each other," Harper added. "I heard we had a near miss with a refueling shuttle last night." "Fantastic," Rylan said, pinching the bridge of his nose. "It's like we're running a daycare for grown-ups. Except the kids have plasma rifles and a taste for alien psychedelics," Harper said. Details, Rylan muttered. "Let's at least make sure today ends with us still in one piece." Hours passed in a blur of damage control and strategic planning. Rylan played the diplomat, the strategist, and the babysitter, juggling tasks with a grim determination. Harper, ever the rock, worked alongside him, his sarcasm a lifeline in the chaos. By the time Miller returned, Rylan felt like he'd aged a year. "Got some news," Miller said, dropping into a chair. "The conduits are secure, for now." "For now?" Harper asked, raising an eyebrow. "Turns out, the Zinthari aren't just packing one trick up their many-sleeved arms," Miller said, rubbing his forehead. "They've got contingencies. I'll need more time to figure out their backup routes." "Do what you have to," Rylan replied. "Just make sure we're not chasing our tails." "On it, Commander," Miller said, standing. "I'll keep digging." As Miller left, Rylan turned to Harper. "You think Ilock knows we're on to him?" Harper shrugged. "Probably. But knowing him, he'll play it cool, like a cat pretending it didn't just fall off the couch." "Let's hope he doesn't have too many lives," Rylan said, weary but resolved. "We need to end this before he does any more damage." "Agreed," Harper said. "I'm getting tired of patching holes in this sinking ship." Rylan nodded, feeling the weight of their precarious situation. Ilock was a crafty adversary, and the Zinthari played a game that was older than any of them could fathom. They'd have to watch their step, or risk becoming another cosmic footnote. "Commander, Harper," the intercom crackled again, Miller's voice urgent. "Iloqu's just scheduled a meeting with Crom and a couple of our department heads." "Damn," Rylan muttered, exchanging a look with Harper. "He's making his move." "Well, let's crash the party," Harper said with a grin. "Show him we're not the welcoming committee." "Right, time to put on our best poker faces," Rylan said, standing. "And maybe bring a stick to poke the hornet's nest." They made their way to the meeting room, the air thick with anticipation. Rylan's mind raced, piecing together strategies and contingencies at breakneck speed. He could only hope that whatever Ilock was planning, they'd be ready to counter it. As they entered, Ilock was already there, his scales catching the light in a way that made him look almost ethereal, if you were into that sort of thing. Rylan wasn't. "Commander Verne," Ilock said smoothly, his many eyes twinkling with what could have been delight or malice. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Just thought we'd drop by, see how our interspecies relations are going," Rylan replied, his tone light but his eyes hard. "Of course," Ilock said, gesturing to the empty seats. "Please, join us." Rylan and Harper sat, their presence a calculated move to show Ilock they weren't buying whatever he was selling. Crom, the human liaison to the Zinthari, looked up with a neutral expression, though Rylan caught a flicker of unease. "We were just discussing potential collaborations," Ilock continued, his voice as smooth as oiled silk. "Ways our cultures can benefit each other. Is that what we're calling it now?" Harper muttered under his breath. "Collaborations," Rylan repeated. "Funny, I thought we were already collaborating. But maybe I missed the part where we all started getting high together." Iloqu's many eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Ah, yes, the matter of the substances. I assure you, it was never our intent to cause complications. Complications? Rylan echoed, a sardonic smile playing on his lips. That's like calling a supernova a light show. Indeed, Iloq said smoothly, not missing a beat. Which is why we are offering alternatives, as we mentioned before. Alternatives, huh? Harper chimed in. And what's the catch? There's always a catch. Iloq regarded them with an inscrutable expression. We only wish for mutual understanding. Mutual understanding, Rylan repeated, tapping his fingers on the table. I guess that's why you're meeting with our department heads without informing me. A simple oversight, Iloq replied, his voice dripping with insincerity. I meant no disrespect. Right, Rylan said, not buying it for a second. So what's your proposal? Iloq leaned back, his gaze steady. We wish to integrate more deeply, share our technologies and resources. It would benefit both our peoples greatly. Or just benefit you more, Harper said dryly. Mutual benefit is always the goal, Iloq replied, unfazed. But of course, the decision is yours to make. Rylan exchanged a glance with Harper. They both knew Iloq was playing a dangerous game, and the stakes were higher than ever. But they couldn't back down, not now. We'll consider your offer, Rylan said finally, his voice steady. But know this, Iloq. We're not pawns. And we won't be used. Iloq inclined his head, a gesture of acknowledgement. Of course, Commander. I respect your position. And I respect yours, Rylan replied, though the words tasted bitter. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a station to run. Indeed, Iloq said, his expression unreadable. I look forward to our continued cooperation. As they left the meeting, Rylan felt a strange mix of relief and dread. They'd managed to hold their ground, but the battle was far from over. Iloqu's web was vast, and their moves would have to be equally cunning. Harper fell into step beside him, his expression thoughtful. Think he bought it? He's bought something, Rylan said, rubbing the back of his neck. I just hope it's not our souls. Guess we'll find out, Harper said, with a wry smile. In the meantime, let's keep our eyes open and our wits sharper than ever. Agreed, Rylan said, determination pooling in his gut. We've got a long road ahead. But we'll get through this. One grim day at a time. Rylan Verne stood on the command deck, eyes locked on the holographic display that flickered with the station's diagnostic data, or what was left of it after the Zintheri had their fun. The console was about as reliable as a politician's promise, with more glitches than a caffeine-deprived hacker's laptop. Seems like the Zintheri are having a blast with our systems, Harper remarked, lounging in his chair, feet propped up like a man who had truly given up on life, or at least cared less than he should. I'm guessing turning our tech into their own personal playground wasn't part of the agreement. Rylan grimaced, his boot tapping a staccato rhythm against the deck plating. Yeah, they're like kids with a new toy, only the toy is our entire station and they're slowly breaking it. Harper snorted, and all the while, they keep feeding us that line about mutual understanding. Makes you wonder if their idea of mutual is just us getting screwed. Makes you wonder a lot of things, Rylan replied, eyes narrowing at the digital chaos. Like how the hell they're controlling our systems. Magic, Harper said with a dramatic wave of his hand. Or maybe something even scarier, advanced technology. Just then, Miller barged in, looking like he'd just fought a losing battle with his own hair and possibly a few existential crises. We've got a problem, Commander. Turns out the Zintheri aren't just messing with our conduits. They're using some kind of interdimensional link to a parallel universe. Rylan raised an eyebrow. A parallel universe? Are they trying to outdo our level of screwed or just showing off now? Both, I think, Miller replied, dropping heavily into a chair. They're exploiting the link to amplify the addictive effects of their substance. It's like they found a way to supercharge their cosmic Kool-Aid. Harper let out a low whistle. Great. As if having our crew turn into space hippies wasn't bad enough, now they're getting cosmic upgrades. Rylan rubbed his temples, feeling the pressure mount. What do we know about this link? How are they using it? Best guess? Miller said, pulling out a datapad that looked like it had seen better days. They're using it to draw energy or influence from this parallel universe. It's like they're tapping into some kind of cosmic cheat code. So, we're not just dealing with an alien substance, Rylan said, his voice laced with sarcasm. "We've got an interdimensional drug cartel on our hands." "Wonderful. Welcome to the future," Harper said with a grin that was anything but reassuring. "Where the drugs come with their own alternate dimensions." Ryland shook his head. "All right, Miller, what can we do to cut this link? Or at least sabotage whatever the hell it is they're doing?" Miller scratched his head. "We'd need to isolate their access point to this universe and shut it down. But it's buried deep in their tech, which is about as user-friendly as a porcupine in a balloon factory." "Great analogy," Harper quipped. "Right up there with that time we tried to outdrink the Martians." Miller chuckled despite the tension. "You know, I still can't drink red wine without getting flashbacks." "Focus, boys," Ryland said, cutting through their banter like a knife through stale bread. "Miller, can you at least pinpoint where their access point is?" Miller nodded slowly. "I think so. It's somewhere near Sector 8. But getting close without raising some serious red flags? That's another story." Ryland considered this, mind racing with possibilities. "All right, we need a distraction. Something big enough to keep them occupied while we poke around where we shouldn't. Like throwing a party and hoping the cops don't show up," Harper suggested. "Except the cops are interdimensional aliens." "Precisely," Ryland said. "Harper, any thoughts?" Harper leaned back, a thoughtful expression on his face. "We could stage a malfunction. Something loud, messy, but ultimately harmless. Make it look like we're working on fixing it. And while they're busy laughing at our incompetence, we slip into Sector 8 and find that access point," Ryland finished, a grim smile touching his lips. "Sounds like a plan," Miller said, rising from his chair. "I'll get started on causing a little controlled chaos." "Make it happen," Ryland said, nodding. "And Harper, spread the word. I want our best on this. We don't get a second chance." "You got it, boss," Harper replied, already pulling up the crew manifest on his datapad. As they moved to put their plan into action, Ryland couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of a precipice, one misstep away from a long fall into oblivion. But what choice did they have? The Zintheri were playing a dangerous game, and they had to match them move for move or risk everything. Hours later, the station was a hive of barely contained chaos. Errant sparks flew from exposed conduits, and the sound of clanging metal echoed through the corridors as Miller's team worked their magic, or their mischief. "How's it looking?" Ryland asked Harper, who was monitoring the situation from the command deck. Harper gave him a thumbs up, looking unreasonably pleased with himself. "Like a disaster movie. The Zintheri are definitely interested. Ilok even sent a couple of his lackeys to watch the show." "Perfect," Ryland said, turning to Miller. "Now's our chance. Let's get to Sector 8. Miller nodded, and they slipped away from the command deck, moving through the familiar labyrinthine corridors of the Arclight. Each step felt like traversing a minefield, the potential for disaster lurking around every corner. As they approached Sector 8, the air seemed to thrum with an otherworldly energy, a faint hum that sent shivers down Ryland's spine. It was as if they were getting closer to the heart of some alien beast, and the beast was very much aware of their presence. "Here it is," Miller whispered, pointing to a seemingly innocuous panel set into the wall. "According to the data, this is the access point. Looks like a regular maintenance panel," Ryland said, examining it closely. "Sneaky bastards." "Yeah, well, sneaky is their middle name," Harper said, keeping watch for any unexpected visitors. "Let's see what happens when we poke the bear, shall we?" Miller went to work, his fingers dancing over the panel's controls. The display flickered, then resolved into a web of alien symbols and energy readings. It was a language they didn't understand, but one that spoke of power and manipulation. "Okay, I think I've got it," Miller said, his voice tense with concentration. "If I reroute this here and disable that, we should be able to sever their link." "Do it," Ryland urged, the weight of the station's fate pressing down on him. Miller nodded, making the necessary adjustments with the precision of a surgeon on a caffeine binge. The hum of the machinery around them grew louder, then suddenly cut out, leaving a silence so profound it was almost deafening. "Well, that's either very good or very bad," Harper remarked, peering over Miller's shoulder. "Only one way to find out," Ryland said, feeling a mixture of dread and anticipation. "Let's get back to the command deck and see what kind of hell we've unleashed." They retraced their steps, the station now eerily quiet, as if holding its breath in anticipation of the inevitable fallout. They returned to the command deck, where Harper quickly scanned the readouts. "Looks like we've done it," Harper reported, a hint of disbelief in his voice. "The link's severed. The Zintheri are scrambling, trying to figure out what happened." "Good," Rylan said, though the victory felt hollow. "But this is just the beginning. They'll come after us with everything they've got. And we'll be ready," Harper said, his usual irreverence giving way to determination. "Besides, what's life without a little interdimensional drama?" Rylan allowed a small smile. "True. Let's see if we can keep this little station of ours from falling apart at the seams." As they settled in to deal with the fallout, Rylan couldn't help but wonder what the Zintheri would do next. They'd poked the hornet's nest, and now they had to brace for the sting. "Commander, there's something else," Miller said, interrupting Rylan's thoughts. "I picked up some unusual readings from the parallel universe connection." "Something more?" Rylan asked, his curiosity piqued despite the looming threat. Miller hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "It's like echoes, signals, someone, or something, was trying to communicate through the link." Rylan frowned, a chill creeping down his spine. "New players on the field? Or just another one of the universe's delightful surprises?" "We'll have to investigate further," Rylan said, a grim determination settling in his gut. "But first, let's deal with the present crisis. One thing at a time." Harper nodded, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "And here I thought space was boring. Turns out it's full of surprises." Rylan shook his head, though he couldn't suppress a wry grin. "Let's just hope the next surprise doesn't come with a death warrant." With that, they turned their focus back to the task at hand. The Zintheri were on alert, and their next move would be crucial. But Rylan and his crew were ready to face whatever came their way. After all, they'd survived this long in the cosmos. What's a few more challenges thrown in the mix? On the Arclight, the air was thicker than a politician's promise. The station's crew, once a collection of mildly dysfunctional humans, now seemed to be auditioning for the role of extras in a galactic disaster flick. Grumbling and muttering, they moved like zombies through the corridors, each step heavy with the weight of the Zintheri substance and its cosmic reverberations. Commander Rylan Verne had seen better days, or at least, he liked to think he had, but memory's a cruel mistress. Earth Command, in their infinite wisdom, had sent him another of their beautifully worded but ultimately useless messages. Resolve the crisis, or else. The "or else" wasn't specified, but Rylan had a vivid imagination. He stood in the command deck, staring at the console that was supposed to be the pinnacle of human ingenuity. It felt about as reliable as a drunken promise. "Earth Command breathing down your neck again?" Harper asked, settling into his chair with a kind of casual apathy only he could muster. Rylan sighed, rubbing his temples. "They're not breathing down my neck. They're setting up camp on my shoulders and roasting marshmallows." "Sounds cozy," Harper said with a smirk, tapping away at his datapad. "Always nice to have that warm corporate glow." "Yeah, like a fire in a paper factory," Rylan muttered. "What's the latest from Sector 8? Harper gestured to the flickering holographic display. "Zintheri are still scrambling. They're about as organized as a cat-herding competition. But we've got bigger fish to fry." Rylan arched an eyebrow. "Bigger than interdimensional drug pushers?" "Morale," Harper replied, uncharacteristically serious. "Crew's on the edge. Zintheri junk is spreading like gossip in a small-town knitting club. People are starting to act unpredictable." "Unpredictable? We're light years from that already." Harper shrugged. "More unpredictable, then. We've got fight clubs popping up in the maintenance bays. Someone tried to start a book club, though that got shut down for causing too much excitement." Rylan shook his head, exasperated. "And where the hell's Miller? Last I saw, he was trying to fix a broken conduit. Or start a new religion around it. Hard to tell these days." "Great. Just what we need. A cult of the holy conduit. Hey, at least it's not another pyramid scheme." Rylan snorted, despite himself. "Small blessings." The console buzzed with a new message, Earth Command's latest attempt at motivation. Rylan skimmed through it, the words blurring into a single droning command. "Fix it, or else." "Got any bright ideas?" Rylan asked, more out of desperation than hope. "Disco party?" Harper suggested. "Bring back retro. Distract everyone with flashing lights and bad music." I think the Zintheri beat us to the flashing lights, Rylan said dryly. We need something real. Well, if real's what you're after, maybe we should just take a page out of the Zintheri's book. Play their game back at them. Rylan considered it, a slow grin spreading despite himself. You mean, show them we can mess with alternate dimensions too? Why not? Harper said, shrugging. Worst case, we rip a hole in the universe. Best case, they get scared and back off. Either way, it's a hell of a show. I like your optimism, Rylan said, though there was little conviction in his voice. Let's see if Miller's fixed that conduit or started praying to it. They found Miller neck deep in wires, muttering a litany of curses that suggested he wasn't quite ready to convert. He looked up as they approached, his expression one of desperate hope or extreme constipation. It was hard to tell. Commander, Harper, Miller greeted them, brushing a stray wire off his shoulder. Here to help, or just here to watch me fry myself? Neither, Rylan said, we're thinking a little creative problem solving. Miller blinked. Creative, as in, we might have to make our own interdimensional link. Just to show the Zintheri we're not scared of a little cosmic chaos. Miller's face lit up with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for mad scientists or toddlers with finger paint. You mean it? We could try to replicate their tech, but it'd be a long shot. Long shots are what we're best at, Harper quipped. Besides, what's life without a little existential dread? Miller nodded, already lost in thought. I'll need time, supplies, a few willing assistants who don't mind risking a bit of body and soul. Consider it done, Rylan said. We're all body and no soul left here anyway. As Miller scrambled to gather his tools in a makeshift team of volunteers, Rylan felt a flicker of hope, a dangerous emotion, but one he couldn't quite extinguish. If they could pull this off, maybe they'd have a fighting chance of scaring the Zintheri away or at least buying some time. Hours bled into what felt like days, time losing its meaning aboard the Arclight as the crew worked to fashion their own piece of cosmic trickery. The ship thrummed with activity, the corridors bustling with anticipation and the occasional scuffle over pilfered rations or contraband Zintheri substance. Rylan wandered through the chaos, offering words of encouragement where he could, though they felt hollow even to him. He paused at one of the observation windows, watching the star Voss flicker ominously, a reminder of the vastness and indifference of the universe. Commander, Harper's voice crackled over the intercom, pulling Rylan from his thoughts. We're ready, or as ready as we'll ever be. Rylan made his way back to the command deck, where Miller's makeshift contraption sat in the center of the room, a tangle of wires and blinking lights that looked like it had been cobbled together from the spare parts of a dozen different universes. That looks safe, Rylan said, eyeing the device skeptically. In the way that a rabid tiger wrapped in tinsel is safe, Harper added. Miller grinned, the excitement of the challenge overriding any sense of self-preservation. It's not pretty, but it should work. If we've done this right, we'll have our own interdimensional link. And if we've done it wrong? Rylan asked. Then I hope you like black holes, Miller replied, cheerfully flipping a switch. The device hummed to life, sending a shiver through the deck. Rylan watched as the air in front of them shimmered, reality rippling like water disturbed by a pebble. For a moment, it seemed like their gamble might pay off. But then the shimmer solidified into a gaping maw of darkness, tendrils of energy lashing out like the tentacles of some unseen beast. The room was filled with a howling wind that seemed to originate from the depths of the void itself. Well, that's new, Harper shouted over the noise, clinging to his station as the deck bucked beneath them. We might have overdone it, Miller admitted, eyes wide as saucers. Rylan barely had time to brace himself before one of the tendrils snaked towards him, wrapping around his arm with the tenacity of a determined debt collector. He felt himself being tugged towards the portal, the station's lights flickering madly as if in protest. Commander, Harper shouted, lunging forward to grab Rylan's other arm, but it was too late. The force of the interdimensional pull yanked Rylan off his feet, dragging him into the darkness with a finality that left the command deck in stunned silence. Rylan hit the ground hard, the air knocked out of him. He lay for a moment, gasping, before the realization hit, he wasn't on the Arclight anymore. The surroundings were alien, the ground beneath him a curious mix of shifting colors and textures that seemed to defy logic. Well, at least I'm not dead, he muttered, pushing himself up onto his knees. Yet, around him, The landscape stretched out into infinity, a bizarre amalgamation of sights and sounds that seemed both familiar and utterly alien. It was like stepping into a dreamscape, or a nightmare, depending on one's perspective. Okay, Rylan, think, he told himself, scanning his surroundings for any sign of life. You're in a parallel universe, alone, probably about to become some cosmic entity's lunchtime snack. What's the plan? He took a step forward, the ground beneath his feet shifting like sand, and stumbled. Catching himself, he muttered a curse, then froze as a sound reached his ears, a soft, rhythmic pulsing that seemed to echo all around him. Turning slowly, Rylan spotted a figure in the distance, shimmering like a mirage. It appeared humanoid, though he couldn't make out the details from this far away. Hey, he called, hoping that whatever this was, it wasn't immediately hostile. Can you help me? The figure remained still for a moment, then began to approach with a fluid grace that was unnerving in its alienness. Rylan stood his ground, every instinct screaming at him to run, but he knew there was nowhere to go. As the figure drew closer, he could see it more clearly, a being of light and shadow, its form shifting and changing with every step. It was beautiful and terrifying, a reminder of the universe's infinite possibilities. You are lost, the figure said, its voice like a chorus of whispers. You could say that, Rylan replied, forcing himself to stay calm. I'm looking for a way back to my own universe. The figure regarded him with eyes that seemed to hold the cosmos within them. Your kind has meddled with forces beyond your understanding. Rylan shrugged, trying for nonchalance. That's humans for you, always sticking our noses where they don't belong. The being seemed to consider this, head tilted as if in thought. There is a way, but it is fraught with peril. Peril's my middle name, Rylan said, though the bravado felt hollow. What do I have to do? The figure extended a hand, its fingers trailing stardust. Follow me, and you shall see. Rylan hesitated, then nodded, stepping forward to take the being's hand. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he had no other choice. With a final glance back at the shimmering horizon, he followed the figure into the unknown, hoping against hope that he'd find his way back before it was too late. Rylan trudged through the ever-shifting landscape, his brain doing its best to file a formal complaint with management about the whole situation. Unfortunately, complaints had a tendency to get lost when reality was busy rewriting itself every few seconds. So, Stardust Fingers, he said, glancing at the being beside him. Got a name, or do I just call you, hey, you? The being didn't break its stride, light and shadow still dancing across its form like a technoparty that was one strobe short of a seizure. Names are transient, you may call me Lumas. Right, Lumas. Nice to meet you, Rylan replied, trying to ignore the nagging voice in his head that screamed he was probably talking to a hallucination. So, what's the deal here? You mentioned something about peril. What's the catch? Lumas turned its head toward him, if you could call it a head. Your kind is not the only one affected by the Xintharies' meddling. There are those among them who disagree with their current methods. What, you mean there's a Xinthari rebellion club hanging around here? Rylan asked, raising an eyebrow. Do we get jackets if we join? The landscape around them shifted once more, revealing a cavernous space that seemed to stretch on forever. Within it, figures moved, Xinthari, but not quite. Their skin shimmered less aggressively, their limbs more relaxed and fluid, like they'd taken up a yoga class between universes. Welcome to the hiding place, Lumas said, gesturing with a flourish. Those who oppose the Xintharies' domination reside here. Rylan scanned the area, unable to shake the feeling that he'd walked into some bizarre support group meeting. So, you guys just hang out here, plotting to overthrow the overlords? Got a plan, or is this more of a winging it situation? A Xinthari, taller than the rest, approached, its skin shimmering in muted tones, like it had decided to dial down the whole cosmic light show. We are the Eclipsed, it said in a voice that sounded like it had swallowed a dictionary. We seek balance, not conquest. Balance, huh? Rylan said, crossing his arms. And what, pray tell, do you propose? Because right now, your pals are turning my crew into space monks high on whatever substance they've cooked up. The eclipsed Xinthari dipped its head in what might have been a nod. We have discovered a method to counteract the addiction. It is risky, but it could restore your people. Risky seems to be the theme of the day, Rylan said with a grimace. Care to elaborate? Lumas stepped forward, its features flickering like a hologram on the fritz. The energies of this universe can be harnessed to purge the influence of the Zintheri substance. But it requires a conduit, someone from your world. Rylan laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. Let me guess, you want me to volunteer? I've already got a full plate with the whole, not dying, thing. We ask, we do not demand, Lumas replied softly. The choice is yours, but the outcome may save your crew. Rylan thought about Harper, Miller, and the rest of the crew back on the Arclight, likely knee-deep in chaos and wondering where the hell he'd disappeared to. All right, he said finally, resignation laced with determination. I'm in, but if this goes sideways, and I end up fried, I'm haunting every last one of you. The Eclipsed gathered around, their presence a comforting weight as they began to chant in a language that felt like it belonged to the stars themselves. Rylan felt a tingle race up his spine, a sensation like static electricity on a cosmic scale. Focus, Lumas instructed, its voice cutting through the symphony of voices. Visualize your world, your people. Their faces, their voices. Rylan closed his eyes, calling up memories of Harper's lazy smirk, Miller's frantic enthusiasm, even the flickering star Voss outside the observation window. A sense of warmth spread through him, as if he was drawing from a well of power that had always been there, just out of reach. The chanting grew louder, and Rylan could swear he saw the air around him shimmering with potential, bending and folding in ways that defied comprehension. The ground beneath him seemed to pulse with life, each beat syncing with the rhythm of his own heart. And then, just as quickly as it began, the sensation faded, leaving Rylan feeling oddly empty and yet whole at the same time. It is done, Lumas said, a note of satisfaction in its voice. The energies will spread through the link you created, cleansing your people. Rylan opened his eyes, blinking against the brightness of the chamber. That better have worked, he muttered, rubbing his arms where the tingle still lingered. Otherwise, we've just wasted a perfectly good cosmic trip. You will know soon enough, the Eclipsed leader said, a subtle shift in its posture suggesting approval. Yeah, well, no pressure, right? Rylan replied, trying to muster his usual bravado. So, how'd I get back? Lumas gestured, and the landscape around them began to warp, folding inward like a collapsing star. A vortex formed, its center a swirling mass of light and shadow that beckoned with the promise of return. Enter the portal, Lumas instructed. It will guide you home. Rylan took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever awaited him on the other side. If this dumps me in the middle of a black hole, I swear I'll, farewell, Rylan Vern, Lumas interrupted, its tone carrying a hint of amusement. May the stars guide your path. With that, Rylan stepped into the vortex, the world around him dissolving into a blur of light and sound. It felt like being caught in the heart of a supernova, every fiber of his being stretched and compressed in ways that would probably make a physicist weep. And then, just as abruptly, it was over. He found himself back on the Arclight, sprawled on the command deck like he'd just been spat out by the universe's most disagreeable taxi service. Commander. Harper's voice was the first thing he registered, followed by the familiar chaos of the deck. You back from your little interdimensional vacation? Rylan groaned, pushing himself into a sitting position. You wouldn't believe the travel accommodations, he said, wincing as he checked for any new appendages or unwanted mutations. Miller appeared beside him, eyes wide with a mix of awe and disbelief. You disappeared, sir. 1 second you were there, and then, poof. Yeah, well, poof's about right, Rylan replied, forcing himself to his feet. The console in front of him hummed with newfound energy, diagnostic data streaming across the holographic display in a flurry of activity. Status report. Harper's fingers flew over his datapad, the casual ease of it a comforting reminder that some things never change. Systems are coming back online. Whatever you did, it's working. Crew reports are already showing improvement, less of the whole speaking in tongues thing. Rylan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Thank Lumas for small favors, he muttered, casting a quick glance at the observation window. Voss still flickered, a constant reminder of the universe's indifference, but for once, it felt a little less ominous. So, what's next, boss? Harper asked, a wry grin tugging at his lips. We gonna take the fight to the Zintheri? Show him we mean business? Rylan considered it, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a familiar cloak. First, we make sure everyone's back to normal, he said, his voice firm. Then, we figure out how to make sure this doesn't happen again. Sounds like a plan, Harper agreed, tapping a few more commands into his datapad. And, next time you go universe hopping, maybe give us a heads up? I'll try, Rylan promised, though the idea of willingly diving back into the cosmic chaos seemed about as appealing as volunteering for Zintheri dental work. But for now, let's keep the rest of the crew from joining the Church of the Holy Conduit. The command deck buzzed with renewed purpose, the crew rallying to the task at hand with a determination born of shared hardship. Rylan watched them work, a flicker of pride warming the edges of his cynicism. They'd survived, against the odds, and maybe, just maybe, they'd come out stronger for it. Hey, Commander, Harper called, breaking into Rylan's thoughts. Think we'll get a commendation for this? Rylan snorted, the sound cutting through the tension like a knife. From Earth Command? More likely they'll just send us another memo about keeping things tidy while we save the universe. Yeah, but at least we get to sit back and watch them scramble for once, Harper said, a mischievous glint in his eye. Rylan chuckled, a genuine, unguarded sound that felt like a victory in itself. Damn right, he agreed, turning his gaze back to the flickering star outside. Damn right. Rylan stared at the flickering star, Voss, as if willing it to give him answers. It remained as stubbornly indifferent as always. So, Miller, he said, turning to his crew member who was fidgeting with the console like it was his personal science project. Got any good news for me, or is today just one long series of cosmic jokes punchlined by our impending doom? Miller, bless him, looked up with the enthusiasm of a puppy who hadn't yet learned that not all sticks are for fetching. The eclipsed Zintheri's interference seems to have cut off the substance at its source. Crew's getting back to their usual grumpy selves, sir. Fantastic. Rylan deadpanned, pretending to ignore the fact that it was possibly the best news he'd heard all year. If we're lucky, they'll be complaining about the coffee instead of chanting in tongues by lunchtime. Harper, sprawled in his chair like a king on a recliner throne, snorted. I don't know, Commander, a crew of space monks might be easier to manage. No arguments, all the meditation you can handle, and they probably clean up after themselves. Yeah, but no one's getting high on inner peace, are they? Rylan shot back, a wry smile tugging at his lips. And besides, I'd miss your delightful apathy. I'm touched, Harper said, clutching his heart theatrically. Really, I am. Rylan's gaze shifted to the holographic display where the Arclight systems were slowly crawling back from the brink. Okay, Miller, here's the deal. We're gonna cut this whole substance mess off at the root. I want a list of all Zintheri activities on the station. Every shady deal, every suspicious shipment. If someone sneezes in Zintheri fluency, I want to know about it. Miller nodded, already tapping away at his console. Understood, sir. I'll cross-reference with the crew's logs and see what shakes out. Good. If we can expose whoever's orchestrating this little interstellar mess, we might have a chance to throw a wrench in their plans. Rylan rubbed his chin, feeling the stubble and wondering if he'd ever get a chance to shave or if he'd end up looking like a space hobo by the end of this. Commander, a voice chimed in over the intercom. It was Luma's, the ethereal tones somehow both soothing and unsettling. We have located the primary link used by the Zintheri for distribution. Lovely timing, Rylan replied, not entirely sure if he was being sarcastic or if the universe had just decided to give him a break for once. Can you guide us there? Certainly, Lumas said, as if mentioning the weather and not the possible dismantling of an intergalactic drug ring. But be warned, Commander. The Zintheri will not take kindly to interference. They never do, Rylan said with a sigh, casting a glance at Harper. Get ready, Lieutenant. We're about to crash a party, and I doubt they'll be handing out gift bags. Oh, good, Harper said, stretching his arms dramatically. I've always wanted to live out my dream of being an intergalactic party pooper. While the Eclipsed offered guidance through the station's labyrinthine corridors, Rylan couldn't help but feel like they were the universe's most irritating GPS, vague, cryptic, and always one step behind when you needed them to be one step ahead. As they reached the corridor leading to the interdimensional link, a Zintheri guard loomed ahead, its skin shimmering with the intensity of a disco ball. Rylan felt a peculiar tugging sensation, like reality itself was trying to suck him in for a closer look. He shook it off, focusing on the task at hand. Quick question. Harper whispered, leaning in like they were sharing secrets instead of plotting a potentially lethal confrontation. What's the plan for dealing with the giant, shimmering nightmare up ahead? Improvise, Rylan replied, because pretending to have a plan was far more comforting than admitting he was winging it. They crept forward, utilizing every shadow and corner to their advantage. The Zintheri guard, it turned out, was more interested in inspecting its own luminescence than in watching for intruders. When they were close enough, Rylan gave Harper a nod. Harper, grinning like a kid with a new toy, pulled out a small device. Time for a little light show of our own. He tossed it, and the device exploded in a burst of sound and light, sending the guard into a frenzied retreat. Nice work, Rylan said, patting Harper's shoulder. You do know how to make an entrance. Just trying to make you proud, boss, Harper replied, as they slipped into the room beyond. The link chamber was a cacophony of shimmering lights and alien technology. In the center stood Iolok, a Zintheri with an air of arrogance so thick you could cut it with a space knife. Its limbs moved in an intricate dance as it manipulated the controls. Iolok, Rylan called, stepping forward. Mind explaining why you're trying to turn my crew into your personal choir? Iolok turned, its eyes narrowing. Ah, Commander Vern, I was wondering when you'd stumble into my web. But it's too late, the process is already underway. Yeah, about that, Rylan said, taking another step. We've got a little countermeasure in place. Thanks to your eclipsed buddies. The Zintheri's expression shifted, somewhere between disbelief and irritation. Impossible, yet here we are, Harper chimed in, gesturing to the glowing console. Looks like your little operation's about to get shut down. Rylan took the opportunity to focus, feeling for the connection Lumas had promised. He could sense it, a web of energy that seemed to pulse with potential. Lumas, now would be a good time, he muttered under his breath. From the shadows, the eclipsed materialized, their presence a soft hum against the chaos. They began to chant, the same starborn language that had worked its magic before. Iolok sneered, moving to disrupt their efforts, but Harper was already on it. Hey, shiny pants, he called, tossing another device that let out a shockwave, buying them precious seconds. Rylan felt the link snap into place, like a jigsaw puzzle finally clicking together. The energies flowed through him and into the Zintheri technology, disrupting the distribution network with a silent roar. Iolok faltered, its control slipping. No, you do not understand the consequences. Funny, Rylan said, stepping forward. I was about to say the same thing to you. The station shuddered, but remained intact, the disruptions seemingly contained. Rylan watched as the eclipsed guided the energies back to their source, severing the connection with a finality that felt like a door slamming shut. Iolok, now cornered, glared at them. You believe you've won? There will be repercussions. I'm sure there will, Rylan replied, not quite caring about the future consequences. He'd handle them when they came, like everything else in his life. But right now, I'd say we're having a pretty good day. Harper nodded, flashing a smirk. You know, for once, I think I might actually enjoy writing the report for this. Miller chimed in over the intercom, his voice a blend of excitement and relief. Commander, the crew's stabilizing and the systems are holding. Whatever you did, it's working. Rylan nodded, a weary satisfaction settling over him. Good to hear, Miller. Keep everyone at their stations, we're not out of the woods yet. As Iloku's defeat sunk in, Rylan felt the weight of the station around him, the crew's lives he was responsible for. Reality had a way of being relentless, and he knew this was just one battle in a much larger war. But for now, they'd won a reprieve, and that was enough. We'll keep you under wraps until Earth Command decides what to do with you, Rylan told Iolok, gesturing for Harper to secure the Zintheri. I'm sure they'll have a field day with the paperwork. As they left the chamber, Rylan felt the familiar grind of duty settling back into place. There were still 1,000 things needing fixing, 1,000 problems waiting to be solved. But at least, for now, there was a momentary peace, however fragile. Hey, Commander, Harper said as they made their way back through the station. You ever think about going into diplomacy? You've got a real knack for it. Rylan chuckled, the sound dry and without humor. Only if I get to bring grenades, he replied. Just in case the negotiations get a bit one-sided. Harper laughed, the sound echoing down the corridors of the Arclight, a reminder that even in the darkest corners of space, there was still room for levity. Well, lucky for us, they haven't invented a problem yet that we can't blow up, shoot, or otherwise annoy into submission. Damn right, Rylan agreed, their footsteps echoing in the now quiet corridors. Damn right. The ship rumbled beneath Rylan Vern's boots, a low, persistent grumble like a cranky old man muttering to himself about the world's inadequacies. In other words, it was business as usual on the Arclight. Commander, Harper's voice crackled over the intercom, as reliable as ever. Just got word from Earth Command. They're so thrilled with our little drug bust, they might send us some kind of commendation. Assuming they can pencil us in between their coffee breaks. Fantastic, Rylan replied dryly. Nothing says job well done like a piece of paper nobody reads. Harper chuckled, the sound distorted through the intercom, but the sarcasm was crystal clear. Maybe we can use it to patch up the hull next time something blows a hole in it. The command deck, despite the recent chaos, was beginning to feel like home again. The consoles blinked and hummed with a kind of reluctant efficiency, like a dog that would rather be napping but obligingly fetches your slippers. Status report, Miller, Rylan called, turning his attention to the young officer who seemed to have permanently affixed his hands to the console. All systems are stabilizing, sir, Miller replied, his enthusiasm bubbling over like a kid at a candy store with a credit card. The crew's detoxing from that Zintheri nonsense, and the tech's holding up better than expected. Great, Rylan said, eyeing the console warily. Let's try to keep it that way. I've had enough existential crises for 1 week. As the minutes ticked by, the Arclight's crew started to emerge from their haze, the Zintheri influence loosening its grip. Faces that had been slack and vacant now showed signs of life, confusion giving way to clarity. Or as much clarity as you could expect in a universe that regularly tried to eat you for breakfast. Harper, Rylan said, rubbing the back of his neck where tension had set up a permanent residence, how's our guest of honor doing? Oh, Iloku's just as charming as ever, Harper replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. We've got him under wraps, all trussed up like a Christmas turkey. I think he's planning his big breakout speech for the next interstellar villain convention. Let's hope he doesn't try to recruit any of our fine crew for his next get-rich-quick scheme, Rylan muttered. I'd rather not explain that one in my report. Don't worry, boss, Harper assured him. I've got my eye on him. If he so much as twitches, I'll have him stuffed in the nearest airlock. Rylan chuckled, a sound that felt good despite the chaos. Remind me to never get on your bad side. As the day wore on, the Arclight felt more like its old self, albeit a version with a few more scars, both literal and figurative. The crew moved with a sense of cautious optimism, their shared ordeal forging bonds that no Zintheri mind trip could sever. Commander, Loomis's voice floated from the shadows, the being's presence a familiar comfort. Your actions today have safeguarded many lives. The Eclipsed are in your debt. Rylan shrugged, a gesture that felt surprisingly heavy. Just doing my job. Besides, I've got a reputation to uphold as the galaxy's most stubborn human. Loomis's laughter was a soft, musical sound, like wind chimes caught in a cosmic breeze. Your resilience is admirable, Rylan Vern. It speaks well of your species. Well, if there's one thing we humans are good at, it's surviving our own worst impulses, Rylan said, a small smile tugging at his lips. And maybe learning a thing or two along the way. As the shifts changed and the stars outside continued their eternal dance, Rylan found himself alone on the command deck, his thoughts his only company. The events of the past days played through his mind, a jumble of chaos, danger, and dark humor. Thinking deep thoughts, Commander? Harper's voice broke the silence, the lieutenant appearing like a shadow with smirk. Something like that, Rylan admitted. Just wondering how we keep ending up in these messes. Probably something to do with cosmic karma, Harper suggested, leaning against the console. Or the universe's idea of a practical joke. Wouldn't be the first time, Rylan said, looking out into the void. You ever think maybe we're just the punchline to some alien comedian's routine? Harper snorted. If that's true, I hope they're at least paying us for the material. They stood there for a moment, two figures against the vast backdrop of space, the silence punctuated by the hum of the ship and the occasional groan of the metal frame settling back into its usual rhythm. You know, Harper said, his tone suddenly more serious, despite everything, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. There's something about this place, this crew. Even you, Commander, that makes the madness worth it. Rylan nodded, the words resonating in a way he hadn't expected. "Yeah, I know what you mean. We might not always like the hand we're dealt, but we sure as hell know how to play it." As they turned to leave, the intercom crackled to life, Miller's voice cutting through the air. "Commander, looks like we've got a transmission from Earth Command. They want a status update on our little situation." "Of course they do," Rylan sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Let's not keep them waiting. I'll bet they're dying to hear about our latest adventure in diplomacy." "Just remember to mention the part where you single-handedly saved the galaxy," Harper quipped. "I'm sure they'll be suitably impressed." "Doubtful," Rylan replied, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "But a guy can dream." The transmission from Earth Command was exactly as Rylan expected. Long on platitudes, short on actual support. Bureaucracy in space, apparently, operated just as efficiently as it did back on Earth. "Commander Verne," the voice over the comms was crisp, professional, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Your report indicates successful containment of the Zintheri influence. We commend your efforts." "Thank you, Command," Rylan replied, his tone as dry as a Martian sandstorm. "We aim to please. Continue monitoring for residual effects," the voice continued, as if reading from a particularly dull instruction manual. "And maintain vigilance against further incursions." "Of course," Rylan answered, resisting the urge to roll his eyes. "We'll keep an eye out for any more unwanted guests." The transmission ended with the usual bureaucratic efficiency, leaving the command deck in silence once more. Rylan turned to Harper, who was shaking his head with a grin. "Gotta love those guys," Harper said. "All the warmth of a freezer on the dark side of Pluto." "Well, at least they didn't ask us to write a thesis on our findings," Rylan replied. Small mercies. The Arclight, for all its flaws and quirks, was beginning to feel like a well-oiled machine again. The crew, despite their ordeal, seemed to bounce back with the kind of resilience that made Rylan proud to call himself human. Miller, ever the eager beaver, had compiled a list of lessons learned from their ordeal, complete with action points and color-coded charts that Rylan was sure would have made a schoolteacher weep with joy. "Commander," Miller said, his face lighting up the moment Rylan walked into the room. "I've drafted a proposal for improving our response protocols in case of future Zintheri interference." Rylan skimmed the datapad, impressed despite himself. "Looks thorough, Miller. Just make sure there's a section for improvisation. You never know when you might need to wing it." "Always, sir," Miller replied, a glint of mischief in his eyes. Wouldn't be the Arclight without a little chaos. As the days passed, the crew settled back into their routines, the specter of the Zintheri influence fading into memory. Life on the Arclight, with its unique brand of insanity, continued as it always had, a testament to humanity's ability to adapt and overcome. In the quiet moments, Rylan found himself reflecting on the journey, the challenges they'd faced, and the strength they'd found in each other. It wasn't always pretty, and it sure as hell wasn't easy, but it was theirs. And as he stood on the command deck, gazing out at the endless expanse of stars, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't expected. The universe might be a chaotic, unpredictable beast, but right here, right now, they were holding their own. "Commander," Harper's voice broke through his thoughts, pulling him back to the present. "You look like you're about to solve all the universe's problems with sheer willpower." "Just appreciating the moment," Rylan replied, turning to face him. "You know, before the universe decides to throw the next curveball our way." Harper grinned, a mischievous light in his eyes. "Well, when it does, we'll be ready. Or at least, we'll pretend to be. That's half the battle, right?" "More than half," Rylan agreed, the weight of the world, or several worlds, lifting just a little. "Let's just hope the next crisis isn't quite as luminous." As the Arclight continued its journey through the stars, Rylan knew they'd face whatever came their way, not with certainty, but with determination, grit, and a healthy dose of gallows humor. Because if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was making the best of a bad situation. And if that wasn't enough, well, they'd always have Harper's legendary sarcasm to fall back on. "Hey, Commander," Harper said, as if reading his thoughts. "You ever think about opening a bar when this is all over? With your stories and my charm, we'd make a killing." Rylan chuckled, the sound echoing through the command deck. "I don't know about a bar, but I think we could market your sarcasm as a weapon. Might be more effective than half the tech we've got on board." "Now there's an idea," Harper replied, his laughter joining Ryland's. "I'll start drafting the business plan." And with that, they continued on, the Arclight carving its path through the cosmos, a testament to resilience, adaptability, and the enduring spirit of humanity. A crew that might not have all the answers, but sure as hell knew how to find them, one sarcastic comment at a time.